Every generation has tried to explain what happens during the final exhale, that thin, trembling moment when the body begins to fail, but consciousness has not yet accepted its departure. For ancient Israel, death was not a curtain that fell abruptly. It was a threshold, a crossing, a moment in which the living world loosened its hold, and another realm, dim, quiet, watchful, opened around the soul like a slow-turning door. American audiences often imagine ancient people approaching death with superstition or fear, but the real sources reveal something different, a sober, structured understanding built from language, ritual, and lived experience. These ancient communities buried their dead with precise gestures because they believed the soul retained awareness for a time. They lit lamps, washed the body, placed it facing a specific direction. None of it was random. It reflected a worldview built on thousands of years of observation. The dying often spoke to things others could not see. They reached toward an unseen presence. They recognized family who had already crossed. And so, as we begin this investigation, not as storytellers, but as historians, it is worth taking a moment to enter their mindset, to understand the world into which these beliefs were born. What follows is grounded in scripture, ancient literature, Near Eastern cosmology, and serious academic work. It is not sensationalism. It is not fantasy. It is a reconstruction of how the earliest biblical cultures understood the moment when life leaves the body. For viewers joining us on this channel, consider subscribing if you want more long-form investigations into the world behind the text, the archaeology, the ancient languages, the beliefs that shaped entire civilizations. Tonight's journey opens one of the oldest and most universal questions. What meets the soul at death's gate? To grasp what happens at the threshold, we must first follow the ancients into the quiet room where a dying person rests. It is usually dusk in these accounts, because villages of the ancient Near East ran on natural light. The household gathers near the bed, not speaking loudly, not moving quickly. In Hebrew culture, this moment was considered a sacred transition. The breath slowing was not only a biological sign, it was a spiritual signal. The word for breath and spirit is the same in Hebrew, ruach. The final exhale was understood as the soul's loosening, a separation from the clay of the body. Ancient writers did not describe this as an instant departure. They imagined the soul rising, hovering, witnessing its own still flesh with bewilderment. Modern readers might assume this imagery is metaphorical, but the ancients were remarkably consistent. Across early Jewish writings, rabbinic tradition, and the literature preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls, death is depicted as a process with stages. First, the breath slips away. Then awareness shifts. The senses continue, but differently. Not through the eyes, but through something deeper that perceives without needing light. In many early texts, the body's growing stillness is paired with the soul's increasing clarity. A dying person might fail to recognize their grandchildren standing at the foot of the bed, yet describe seeing something no one else can. A figure, a presence, a messenger. This was not considered extraordinary. It was expected. Families listened for final words because it was believed the veil was thinning and the dying person could perceive truths invisible to the living. Similarly, the earliest Christians preserved stories a believer seeing radiant figures just before passing. Whether these visions were literal or symbolic, they reflect long-standing belief. No one crosses the threshold alone. We must be careful here. Historians cannot confirm every detail described in ancient accounts, nor should we treat poetic language as literal ethnography. But we can trace patterns, we can examine the cultural, linguistic, and archaeological evidence. And when we do, a clear picture emerges. Ancient Israel believed the transition from life to death was monitored, witnessed, guided. Imagine the final moments as they described them. The dying person's breathing slows, irregular at first, then softer, then barely perceptible. The skin cools. Family members press cloths to the forehead. Oil lamps flicker in the low light. The room smells of clay, oil, and earth. Outside, the village continues on. Animals settling, voices fading, the desert cooling under a darkening sky. Inside, everything narrows. Time pauses. The dying person's gaze shifts upward or beyond the room. They are seeing something the others cannot. According to ancient belief, this is the moment before the threshold, the point at which the soul has not yet detached but no longer belongs fully to the world of the living. It is here, the sources say, that a distinct presence appears, neither frightening nor familiar, not a departed relative, not a deity, but a messenger. Some texts call this figure a guide. Others speak of it simply as the one who receives. In American documentary terms, this is not a ghost story. It is a recurring motif across centuries of Jewish and early Christian literature, suggesting that the ancients sensed, or believed they sensed, a witness standing at the edge of death. The breath leaves the body, the chest no longer rises. A silence fills the room, a deep, unnatural stillness that families recorded in writings, psalms, and early traditions. To the living, this marks the moment of death. But according to ancient accounts, for the soul, it is the moment of awakening. The world no longer feels heavy. The noise of the living fades. Colors lose their brightness. Yet awareness remains sharp, almost painfully clear. The soul is described as alert, observant, attempting to understand its new condition. The ancients did not believe the dead instantly forgot their life. Instead, they believed memory became vivid. The soul remembered everything, childhood, failures, kindnesses, secrets, because memory was part of its essence, not its biology. We often imagine the afterlife through modern categories: heaven, hell, light, darkness. But the ancient worldview was different. The earliest Hebrews believed all the dead descended to a quiet realm called Sheol, a place of stillness beneath the earth, where no one praised, no one worked, no one celebrated. Later, Jewish writings introduced distinctions, places of rest for the righteous, places of shadow for the wicked. But none of these developments erased the core belief. The moment of death marks a transition, not an annihilation. In those first seconds after death, according to ancient writers, the soul becomes aware of two realities at once. First, it recognizes that it is no longer bound to the body. Second, it senses that it is not alone. The presence standing near, the guide, does not speak in words. Instead, the soul feels understood, accompanied, observed, with a kind of patient neutrality. This figure is not there to judge. It is there to escort. Before the soul moves, however, the ancients believed something else occurs, something rarely discussed in modern sermons, but commonly referenced in early texts. The soul looks back. It sees its body. It sees the room. It sees the loved ones who are mourning. And for a brief moment, according to numerous ancient traditions, the soul remains close, not to haunt, not to linger, but because the transition is not complete. Some Jewish writings suggest the soul hovers near the body for a time, reluctant to leave. Others describe this period as a final opportunity for the soul to understand its life clearly, without the distortions of emotion or ego. The notion may sound mystical to modern ears, but it reflects a consistent belief. Death is not a single step, but a passage with stages. The guides, these messengers, are portrayed as patient. They do not rush the soul. They wait. They allow the soul to observe, to accept, to release. Only after this does the transition truly begin. The movement is not described as walking nor floating, but as being drawn, not against the soul's will, yet not entirely by its choice. It is as though the soul is pulled toward the boundary that separates the visible world from the unseen. Ancient writers describe this threshold using metaphors: a gate, a veil, a shadowed path, a narrow passage. None of these metaphors should be taken literally. Instead, they reflect the human attempt to explain something inherently beyond human language. It is not that the soul walks through a physical doorway. It is that the mind must express in earthly terms a transition that is not earthly. What is certain from the sources is this: the soul perceives a shift. Sound becomes distance. Light becomes irrelevant. Space feels stretched. Time loses meaning. And yet awareness remains intact, even heightened. This moment fascinated early Jewish thinkers. They wrote about it in funeral elegies, in laments, in wisdom literature, and in apocalyptic texts. They believed the soul had clarity in these moments, a type of honesty impossible in life. It remembered who it was, what it became, what it loved, and what it harmed. This was not punishment. It was truth illuminated. For a culture built on covenant and moral responsibility, this clarity mattered deeply. Only after this awakening, this recognition, does the guide gesture, or perhaps simply move in a way the soul understands. The journey begins. The threshold approaches. The world of the living fades, until it becomes a thin line behind the soul, a fading memory of heat, breath, voices, and pain. This is the moment early traditions describe as the crossing. When ancient Jewish and early Christian writers describe the moment after death, they return to one recurring theme with striking consistency. A guiding presence appears, not a relative, not a deity, not a creature of fantasy, a messenger, a being whose task is to meet the newly departed soul at the edge of transition and accompany it through the unseen realm. Modern readers often imagine this figure through popular culture: winged angels, glowing forms, shining beings dressed in white. But the ancient world did not indulge in these visual stereotypes. The earliest descriptions focused not on appearance, but on function. The guide is defined by role, not shape. It stands at the boundary between worlds because no human being, righteous or wicked, was believed to navigate the afterlife unaided. The idea was not unique to Israel. Cultures across the Near East held similar beliefs. But what makes the Hebrew and early Christian sources extraordinary is their uniformity. While artistic imagination varied, the core idea persisted for centuries. A soul never crosses alone. To understand this guide, we must explore how ancient writers describe the moment it appears, the instant when the dying person's senses slip from the physical world but remain conscious of presence. According to Jewish burial customs and rabbinic tradition, families believed the soul could perceive both earthly and spiritual realities during the transition. That liminal state, neither fully alive nor fully separated, created openness. Individuals nearing death often spoke of seeing someone standing at their side, not a frightening figure, more like a watcher, a sentinel, a silent companion. In some accounts, the presence is described as the one appointed to receive the soul. Early Christian authors spoke of the one who leads upward, or the one who stands by the body. The specific language changes depending on the period, but the core idea does not. There is a designated being whose responsibility is to meet the soul the moment it steps beyond life. Imagine the scene as the ancients did. The room grows quieter. The person lies still, breathing shallowly. Family members keep vigil, murmuring prayers or psalms, their voices low as oil lamps flicker in the dimness. Outside, darkness settles over the village. Inside, a heavier silence descends. Not the silence of sleep, but the silence of thresholds. Then something changes. Ancient accounts describe the dying person's eyes shifting toward a corner of the room or toward a point beyond the wall. They seem to follow something unseen. Their expression softens or sharpens, depending on the context. They whisper a name or murmur that someone has come. Even in the earliest centuries, these behaviors were documented with reverence rather than fear. The guide has arrived, not in shining radiance, not with trumpets or clouds, but quietly, purposefully, as though stepping into a role older than humanity itself. The earliest Hebrew descriptions call this figure a malach, a messenger. The word does not mean angel in the modern artistic sense. It means one sent, a representative, an envoy, someone entrusted with responsibility. In apocalyptic literature, especially from the Second Temple period, this guide is portrayed as one of many beings whose work bridges the gap between heaven and earth. But in the intimate context of death, the role becomes deeply personal. The guide appears not to frighten or judge, but to accompany, to ensure that the soul does not wander lost into the vastness of the unseen realm. What matters most is not what the guide looks like, but what the soul experiences upon encountering it. The soul recognizes immediately that the presence is not hostile. Ancient writers describe a sense of clarity, of understanding without words. The guide does not speak in language. It communicates through perception, through certainty, through a type of awareness only possible when the soul has separated from the limitations of the physical world. Consider this from the perspective of the ancients. The soul has just awakened to itself, aware of its departure from the body, aware of memory, aware of truth, with a clarity unclouded by fear or pride. It sees its loved ones weeping. It sees the stillness of its own flesh. And then it turns, not physically, but in awareness, toward the presence waiting beside it. This presence is neither familiar nor alien. It carries no recognizable face. Yet the soul knows instinctively that it has been expected. According to early Jewish descriptions, the guide stands at the threshold like a sentry assigned to watch over those who cross, not to judge them. That responsibility belongs elsewhere, not to comfort them. though the presence often brings a sense of unmistakable calm. But to accompany them as they enter a realm that human senses were never meant to navigate alone. The guide's first task is simple: ensure that the soul separates fully from the body without confusion or distress. Ancient writings insist that the soul's first experience after leaving the body is bewilderment. It still perceives time, memory, emotion. It sees its surroundings, but without the limitations of sight. It feels pulled between two realities, the world it left behind and the realm it is entering. The guide's presence stabilizes this transition. It is like a lighthouse in a storm, steady and silent. Once the soul acknowledges the presence, another stage begins. The guide now positions itself at the boundary, the veil, between the physical world and the unseen realm. This veil is described in ancient texts using metaphors because human language cannot express the actual experience. Some call it a gate. Others call it a border of shadow. Early Christian authors speak of it as the place where the world's light ends. None of these expressions are literal. They are attempts to capture the sense of crossing into a dimension not governed by sunlight, time, or distance. The presence escorts the soul toward this boundary, though the movement is not physical. Rather, the soul feels drawn, guided by purpose. It does not float or walk, it transitions. The closest analogy in modern terms might be the shift from one state of being to another, like a flame passing from wick to air. Why did ancient cultures believe in this guide so firmly? Because their worldview insisted that the cosmos was ordered. Nothing was random. Every part of life had structure, including its end. Just as a child is delivered into the world by hands that receive it, so the soul is delivered out of the world by a presence assigned to welcome it. This guide is not always alone. Some ancient writings hint at multiple presences, especially when an individual had lived a life of significant moral weight. Not guardians in the modern supernatural sense, but witnesses who accompany the soul to the place where its life will be evaluated. These accounts do not aim to frighten. They aim to express moral reality. Life has consequences, and those consequences follow the soul into death. But in the earliest and most consistent traditions, the guide is a single presence, patient, calm, purposeful. As the soul approaches the veil, it begins to sense what lies beyond. The ancient writers describe this moment with great care. The world of the living seems distant, like a fading echo. The desert wind that once felt hot now feels irrelevant. Voices become memory. The weight of the body, the heaviness of breath, the constraints of pain, all slip away. What remains is awareness, awareness of self, awareness of truth. Awareness of the unseen realm beginning to open like a landscape revealed at dawn. The guide remains close. In some traditions it holds the soul metaphorically, not in hands, but in certainty. In others it stands slightly ahead, leading the way through the dim passage that marks the entrance to the afterlife. Writers from the period describe this initial passage as neither bright nor dark, neither peaceful nor terrifying. It is simply unfamiliar, a realm not shaped by the sun, a world where distance and time are not measured as they are in the physical world. The guide ensures the soul does not wander. It directs the soul toward the place appointed for the next stage. And this next stage, according to ancient writings, is where the journey becomes more complex, where the soul meets not just one presence but many, watchers, guardians, interrogators, witnesses. But that moment has not arrived yet. For now, the guide leads the soul onward. The boundary between worlds grows near. The last threads connecting the soul to the body dissolve. The last sounds of the living fade completely. The soul steps, not on ground, not through air, but through the veil. In ancient belief, this is the moment the world of the living is fully behind. The destination has not yet been reached, but the journey has undeniably begun. The moment the soul approaches the veil is described in ancient sources with a mixture of awe, restraint, and symbolic language. Never sensational, never exaggerated, yet unmistakably profound. The Hebrew writers, especially those from the Second Temple period, understood that what happens at the boundary of life cannot be captured in literal terms. They wrote instead in images, metaphors, and carefully chosen phrases meant to convey an experience that transcends the senses. To modern readers it may seem poetic. To the ancients, it was simply honest. The veil was not a cloth or a curtain. It was a change in perception, a shift in the way the soul experienced reality. The world of the living began to fade, not because the soul drifted away from it, but because the world itself was no longer the soul's medium. Light, sound, weight, distance, all the elements that define human existence, lost their meaning in gradual perceptible steps. Imagine standing in a desert at twilight. The ground beneath your feet is still warm from the sun, but the air cools rapidly. Shadows lengthen, colors flatten. The horizon becomes uncertain. The world is still there, but its sharpness softens. Now imagine that same shift happening not around your body, but around your consciousness. That is how ancient writers described the veil, a dissolving of the familiar. The first thing the soul notices, according to these early traditions, is that the body no longer responds. This realization is not frightening. It is simply strange. The soul tries to breathe, but breath is no longer necessary. It tries to blink, but blinking has no meaning. The body, once the vessel through which all human experience flowed, has become silent, still, a former home. The guide remains near, patient, attentive, but not interfering. Its presence communicates stability. The soul senses that nothing occurring is accidental, nothing chaotic, nothing uncontrolled. The ancients believed this moment was the first time a human experienced pure awareness, consciousness without the filters of flesh, senses, or fear. As the soul adjusts, the physical world begins to dim, not in darkness, but in relevance. The living see through light. The soul sees through truth. This distinction appears repeatedly in early writings. The notion that physical sight is limited, but the soul perceives essence, intent, memory, consequence. In the earliest Hebrew worldview, the veil was sometimes described as the boundary between the realm of breath and the realm of shadow. Not a shadow of fear, but a shadow of what is unseen by the living. Later texts refine this idea. Instead of darkness, they speak of transition, like a doorway into a region not ruled by the sun. At this boundary, the soul often gazes back one last time. The ancients believed this backward glance was significant. The soul sees the room clearly, not with eyes, but with awareness. Loved ones gathered, the body lying still, lamps flickering, morning beginning. But the emotional attachment to that scene loosens. The soul feels compassion, but without the anchors of grief or fear. It sees life continuing without it, and understands that this continuity is natural and rightful. What happens next is where ancient writers become most cautious. They acknowledge that language fails. Some describe the veil as a mist. Others call it a threshold of silence. Early Jewish mystics speak of it as the moment when the outer senses fall away. Greek-speaking Christians refer to it as the border where the world's light ends. Apocalyptic texts describe a shift in the very texture of existence. But these descriptions all share one theme. The veil is not content, it is transition. The soul feels drawn toward it, not compelled, not forced. Drawn, as though something in its nature recognizes that the journey must continue. The guide accompanies it, neither ahead nor behind, neither commanding nor urging, simply present. In many traditions, the guide's presence ensures the soul does not fear this unfamiliar passage. The guide is the constant in a moment when everything else changes. As the soul approaches the veil, time begins to collapse. Seconds, memories, sensations, none follow their earthly patterns. Ancient authors describe this collapse not as confusion, but as liberation. Without the constraints of heartbeat and breath, the soul becomes capable of perceiving multiple realities at once. It senses the fading world of the living. It senses the realm beyond, and it senses itself fully, nothing hidden, nothing suppressed. This absolute clarity is described in early Jewish writings as the unveiling of the inner man. In early Christian texts, it is the soul's awakening. The terminology differs, but the meaning is the same. The soul becomes aware of its own truth with an honesty impossible during life. Now, the veil stands directly before it. Some texts describe this moment as a thinning of reality. The world seems to flatten like a shadow, losing its depth. Other accounts speak of a soft brightness, not like sunlight, but like the glow of understanding. Still others depict the passage as silence, pure, total silence, where nothing exists except awareness. In the ancient world view, the veil marked the boundary between the realm shaped by creation and the realm that observes creation. Not heaven, not hell, but the space between, the threshold through which every human must pass. The soul does not walk through it, it simply transitions. One moment it perceives the fading world behind it, the next it is aware of a new environment entirely. The transition is instant, but the understanding of it unfolds gradually, like dawn spreading across the desert. On the other side of the veil, the soul encounters a landscape unlike anything in the living world. Not physical land, but a realm shaped by purpose. Ancient writings describe this realm in varied ways. Some speak of corridors of shadow where watchers stand guard. Others describe open expanses where souls gather. A few portray a structured hierarchy of beings who serve different roles at the threshold. But before any of that becomes clear, the soul encounters something more immediate. The watchers, the beings assigned to observe, question, or escort souls based on the lives they lived. The guide brings the soul to this place, but does not speak. It does not judge. It does not explain. It simply brings the soul to the point where its responsibility ends. And then something new occurs. The presence of multiple watchers becomes perceptible. These beings do not resemble humans. They do not resemble the guide. They do not resemble anything from the physical world. Ancient writers struggled to describe them. Some call them those who stand in shadow. Others call them the ones who look upon the deeds of men. They are not hostile. They are not comforting. They are observers, assigned to witness the truth of every soul that crosses through the veil. Their presence is not frightening, because fear is a physical response. The soul feels something deeper, recognition, a sense that these beings have always been aware of it, not spying, not lurking, but witnessing the moral shape of its life. Ancient sources insist nothing about this encounter is arbitrary. The watchers do not appear for drama or intimidation. They appear because the next stage of the afterlife requires truth, and truth must be observed, not merely remembered. With the veil behind it, the world of the living gone, and the watchers ahead, the soul begins the next phase of its journey, the phase that determines its path upward or downward. When the ancients spoke of the realm beyond the veil, they described a place neither peaceful nor terrifying, neither heaven nor judgment, but a threshold governed by watchers, beings assigned not to punish, not to comfort, but to observe. For centuries, this idea remained one of the most carefully guarded components of ancient Jewish and early Christian belief. It appears in fragments, in prophetic visions, in wisdom literature, in apocalyptic writings found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, in rabbinic commentary, and in early Christian texts that circulated long before formal theology solidified. These watchers, according to the earliest descriptions, occupy a position unlike any other. They stand not in heaven, not on earth, but in the space where the two realities brush against one another. They are stationed at the boundary, not to stop souls from passing, but to witness what no human observer can, the moment when a soul's life stands revealed in full clarity. To understand who these watchers are, we must begin with the ancient idea that every moral act has weight, a ripple that continues beyond the moment it occurs. In the ancient worldview, a deed does not disappear simply because time passes. It becomes part of a person's essence, and when the soul crosses the veil, that essence becomes visible, not in the sense of glowing light or dark aura, but as the soul's own transparency. Nothing is hidden because nothing can be hidden. The watchers exist to perceive this truth. They are not judges. Judgment belongs to another stage entirely. They are not executioners. They carry no weapons. They do not resemble the avenging beings described in some apocalyptic visions. Instead, they are observers whose presence ensures that no soul enters the afterlife unseen or misunderstood. Their observation brings order to the realm beyond life, much as law and covenant brought order to ancient Israel. To visualize the environment in which they appear, imagine a landscape shaped not by physical geography, but by role and purpose. Ancient authors describe the threshold beyond the veil as a place where form does not follow earthly rules. There is no stone, no soil, no horizon. Instead, there is structure in the form of presence, beings positioned according to their tasks, not according to physical space. The soul arrives in this realm accompanied by its guide. The guide has fulfilled its role, ensuring the soul did not cross alone, stabilizing its awareness during the transition, and bringing it to the point where other beings take responsibility. Once the soul stands before the watchers, the guide does not vanish. It simply steps aside, receding into the background, neither leaving nor interfering. For the soul, this is the first moment of spiritual exposure. In the world of the living, a person can conceal thoughts, intentions, motivations, regrets. In the realm beyond the veil, none of this concealment remains. The soul does not confess its life. It simply is its life. The watchers perceive this immediately. Ancient descriptions portray the watchers as beings who do not communicate in sound or gesture. Their awareness is constant and penetrating, not invasive, not aggressive, but absolute. They are often described through metaphor, those who stand in shadow, meaning not darkness, but a realm beyond earthly perception. Those whose eyes are like still water, meaning reflective, undistorted. Those who neither sleep nor slumber, meaning eternal wakefulness. These descriptions do not ask us to imagine literal shapes. Instead, they emphasize qualities: vigilance, impartiality, clarity. Their task is to evaluate not what the soul claims, but what the soul is. In ancient belief, the soul carries its life as a pattern, a structure, a resonance of truth formed by choices, intentions, and consequences. These patterns are not visible to the living world, but to the watchers they are unmistakable. The watchers observe three core aspects of the soul. 1. The truth of the person's character, not how others judged them, not how they portrayed themselves, but the interior truth revealed by the soul's own clarity. 2. The weight of the person's deeds, not the magnitude of achievements, but the moral substance of actions, even the ones forgotten in life. 3. The alignment of the person's intentions. In ancient thought, intention carried enormous weight. A good act performed with corrupt motives was not the same as a good act done from genuine righteousness. The watchers read these realities the way humans read faces, instinctively and immediately. But watchers do not speak their observations aloud. They do not announce verdicts. They do not praise or condemn. Their role is strictly to witness, because in ancient Near Eastern cosmology, truth must be seen to be established. Only after this witnessing takes place can the soul proceed to the next stage of its journey, whether upward or downward. The watcher's presence also serves another purpose, preventing the soul from wandering into realms where it does not belong. The ancients believed the afterlife contained multiple regions, some for rest, some for shadow, some for awaiting resurrection. The threshold realm, where the watchers stand, is not a place of dwelling, but of transition. The watchers ensure that souls continue into the realm appointed to them. This idea appears in numerous early Jewish writings, including texts from Qumran, where spiritual beings are described as standing at the gates, watching the ways of men, and observing the paths of the righteous and the wicked. Early Christian writings echo similar themes, describing spiritual beings who stand by the soul at the moment of death to observe its true nature. These beings are not emotionally invested. They do not rejoice in righteousness or weep over wickedness. They perceive. They ensure accuracy. They serve the order of the unseen realm. The soul experiences their presence not with fear, because fear belongs to physical chemistry, but with a profound sense of being fully known. For some souls, this knowledge brings peace. For others, it brings discomfort, not because the watchers condemn them, but because truth itself is unfiltered. The watchers do not delay the soul. Their evaluation is instantaneous because it is based on what the soul already is. Nothing needs to be presented or defended. No argument is required. The soul's essence is its testimony. Once the watchers have perceived the soul in full, something subtle occurs. The realm around the soul shifts. The guide becomes perceptible again, stepping forward. The watchers remain in place, silent, but their role is complete. Now, the soul becomes aware of two paths. These are not roads or stairways, not literal upward or downward directions. They are movements of reality itself, pulls, directions of alignment. One pull leads toward regions described by ancient texts as restful, bright, or peaceful. The other leads toward places described as shadowed, solemn, or isolating. This is not yet judgment. This is movement based on resonance, like a sound drawn toward its matching tone. The ancients believed that souls naturally gravitate toward realms that reflect the moral shape of their lives. The watchers observe this movement, ensuring it follows the proper course. Some souls are drawn upward immediately. Others are drawn downward. Others remain for a moment longer, caught between the two pulls, their lives complex enough to require further evaluation at later stages. But no soul leaves the threshold without being seen by the watchers. Only when the watchers withdraw their attention does the soul begin the journey toward the region appointed for it. This moment, the departure from the watchers, is where the afterlife becomes fully real to the soul. The veil is far behind. The watchers have completed their task. The guide remains near, signaling the direction. And now the soul moves, truly moves, either toward ascent or descent, guided by ancient structures older than nations, older than human memory. This is where the next chapter begins, the soul's first steps into the realms beyond, the upward path and the downward path, shaped by centuries of evolving Jewish and early Christian belief. When the soul leaves the realm of the watchers, it enters one of the most debated and misunderstood stages of the ancient afterlife, the movement either upward or downward. This moment, though often dramatized in modern imagination, was described by ancient Jewish and early Christian writers with surprising restraint. They did not picture staircases in the sky or fiery pits beneath the earth. Instead, they spoke of directions of belonging, realms aligned with the moral and spiritual condition of the soul. To understand this movement, we must step into the mindset of the ancient world, where geography was not only physical, but symbolic. The Hebrew vocabulary for up and down carried spiritual meaning. Ascent represented nearness to the divine, light, order, purity, truth. Descent represented distance, shadow, isolation, estrangement. These directions expressed not physical motion, but moral resonance. When the soul departs from the watchers, it immediately senses these pulls. They are not commands. They are alignments. The soul gravitates toward the realm that reflects what it has become over the course of its life. In ancient thought, this is not a punishment nor a reward. It is a natural consequence, as instinctive as a flame rising or a stone falling. Yet the ancients believed this transition was not always simple. The early Israelites imagined a single destination, Sheol, the cavernous realm of the dead, where every soul, righteous or unrighteous, traveled. But over time, as Jewish thought developed, the afterlife evolved into a more complex landscape. The influence of Persia, the rise of apocalyptic literature, and the intense cultural and theological debates of the Second Temple era reshaped the idea of the world to come. By the time of the early Christians, the ancient afterlife was understood as a system of realms, places of rest, places of waiting, places of shadow, and places of preparation for the final resurrection. Each soul's path reflected not merely deeds, but the truth of identity. So, what exactly does the soul encounter during this upward or downward motion? To begin, the soul experiences movement without distance. It does not travel through air or descend through earth. Instead, it experiences a change in state, like stepping from one room of reality into another room that was always adjacent, but unseen. Everything that occurs now happens in a space not governed by physical laws. For souls drawn upward, the transition is described in ancient writings as a gradual brightening, not light in the physical sense, but clarity, awareness, peace. It is the lifting of burdens the soul did not even realize it carried in life. Fear, regret, confusion, bitterness, unfinished conflicts. These weights lose their grip. Scholars often describe this stage as the first rest, the soul's arrival into a realm where suffering no longer defines existence. For souls drawn downward, the transition is different. Ancient texts portray it not as flames or torment, but as distance, a growing sense of separation from goodness, purpose, and connection. The soul becomes aware of the isolation that defined parts of its moral life. There is no external tormentor, no creature imposing punishment. There is only the truth of who the person became, felt in full clarity. It is a solemn path, not a dramatic one. To the ancients, both directions were natural consequences of a life's trajectory. A soul whose life resonated with justice, mercy, humility, and righteousness gravitated upward. A soul whose life was built on selfishness, cruelty, exploitation, or deceit gravitated downward. This was not theology, it was cosmology. The universe was morally structured, and the soul aligned with the part of that structure it matched. One of the most compelling aspects of this ancient belief is that the soul does not travel alone, even now. The guide remains. Its presence is steady, not instructing, not evaluating, but simply accompanying. It reflects the ancient conviction that the unseen realm is ordered, and that no soul is abandoned or left to wander without purpose. As the soul ascends or descends, the environment shifts around it. The early Jewish descriptions portray this shift in symbolic terms. Winds that carry no air, brightness that carries no heat, shadow that carries no fear. The ancients were clear that these are metaphors, attempts to describe realities without physical counterparts. For souls ascending, the journey brings a sense of relief, a relief not from suffering, but from the weight of mortality. The boundaries of the former world fall away. Hunger, pain, aging, weariness, fear of loss. These were not merely biological burdens, they were existential ones. Their removal allows the soul to experience its true nature more fully. In ancient Christian texts, this is described as the soul being escorted toward a place of rest, sometimes portrayed as a garden, sometimes as a bright region, sometimes simply as a place near the righteous. These descriptions vary not because of contradiction, but because the realm itself is not visual. The writers used earthly images to express a reality that transcends earthly experience. For souls descending, the transition is quieter, heavier. The descent is not punishment. It is alignment with a realm shaped by moral estrangement. In certain early Jewish writings, this realm is described as shadowed, not because it lacks light, but because it lacks connection. The soul becomes aware of the distance between itself and the goodness it neglected or opposed in life. The weight of regret is real here, but it is not imposed. It arises from awareness. The journey downward is not chaotic. It is structured, solemn, purposeful. The ancients believed that even this realm had order, beings assigned to oversee, boundaries that could not be crossed, and a role in the ultimate restoration of creation. This was not a place of eternal torment in early thought. It was a waiting place, a holding of consequence until the final resurrection. But not all souls move definitively upward or downward in this first stage. Some remain in a middle region for a time. Their lives were complex, filled with both righteousness and wrongdoing. These souls do not drift. They are guided to places of reflection, regions of neutrality, where their next stage is determined not by a simple binary, but by the deeper shape of their existence. Ancient scholars wrote of this with profound humility. They understood that human lives cannot always be categorized simply. The middle path was not indecision, it was justice. A life of mixed consequence required a realm of careful preparation. In this middle realm, the soul becomes aware of unfinished truths. It sees the effects of its choices on others. It recognizes the good it did, but also the harm it caused. This awareness is not torture. It is clarity, a necessary step before the soul proceeds onward. This complex system of realms, upward, downward, and the middle region, might seem foreign to modern readers. But to the ancients, it was a reflection of their world, layered, moral, structured, purposeful. What is remarkable is that, for all their descriptions, the ancient writers never depicted the soul as passive. Even in the unseen realm, the soul is conscious, aware, responsible, alive. It moves toward the realm that fits it, not because it is forced, but because the unseen world recognizes the truth of every person. The journey continues until the soul reaches a place of rest or shadow, the first stable destination beyond the veil. This destination is not final. It is the beginning of the long aftermath, the realm of rest for the righteous, the realm of shadow for the estranged, and the preparation for the final evaluation, when all creation is restored. So the soul moves deeper now, past the threshold, past the watchers, past the initial ascent or descent, toward the realms described with reverence and caution in the earliest writings. And it is in those realms that the next chapter unfolds. The upward path described by ancient writers leads to a realm known across centuries by many names: the place of rest, the bosom of the patriarchs, the garden of peace, the region of brightness, the chamber of the righteous. These titles are not competing claims. They are different attempts to describe a reality that cannot be expressed through ordinary language. The realm of rest was not a physical location, but a condition of existence, a place where the soul, freed from mortality, entered peace that was deeper than sleep and brighter than dawn. To ancient Israel, peace was not merely silence or stillness. Peace, shalom, meant completeness, wholeness, harmony between a person and the world, a person and others, a person and God. In life, such peace was rare, fragile, constantly disrupted by conflict, guilt, fear, illness, oppression, and death. But beyond the veil, in the realm of the righteous, peace was believed to exist in its purest, undisturbed form. To understand the realm of rest, we must return to the earliest descriptions of what the righteous anticipated after death. Before the exile to Babylon, Israelites believed all souls descended into Sheol, a place of shadows and silence. But even then, there were hints, faint, poetic, of a different fate for the righteous. Some psalms speak of being taken by God rather than left among the silent. Wisdom traditions speak of the righteous being held safe in divine presence. After the exile, these traces grew into fully formed beliefs. Influenced by prophetic visions, Persian cosmology, and the developing literature of the Second Temple period, Jewish thought expanded into a structured afterlife with distinct regions. By the time of early Christianity, the idea of a place of rest was deeply established, treasured, anticipated, and described with profound reverence. What, then, does the soul encounter upon entering this realm? The ancients were careful not to describe physical landscapes. They used images, gardens, light, gentle breezes, quiet fields, not because the place literally resembled these things, but because human language needed something familiar to express a reality completely unlike the physical world. Imagine peaceful brightness, not a blinding light, but a clarity, a warmth that does not burn, a sense of rightness, of everything falling into proper place, of burdens dissolving the moment the soul arrives. This is the language ancient writers used to describe the realm of rest. The soul enters and immediately feels relief, a relief not from pain alone, but from the weight of mortality itself. All the emotional heaviness carried in life, fear of loss, anxiety about the future, shame, regret, falls away like dust washed from the body after a long journey. The righteous do not lose their identity. On the contrary, the ancient texts insist they become more themselves than ever. Freed from the distortions of the physical world, they understand their own lives with clarity. They see what mattered, what did not, what endured, and what was fleeting. They see their relationships not through the lens of conflict, but through the lens of truth. They understand their purpose, their failures, their victories with perspective that was impossible in life. One of the most consistent themes across Jewish and early Christian literature is reunion. The realm of rest was understood as the place where the righteous are gathered, not scattered, not isolated. They are brought together. Patriarchs, prophets, ancestors, and the faithful of every generation share this region, not as strangers, but as a community, united in peace. But this reunion is not sentimental. It is not emotional in the earthly sense. It is recognition. Souls perceiving one another fully, without masks, without misunderstandings, without the barriers that define human society. The realm of rest was frequently described through the figure of Abraham. For centuries, Jewish expressions such as resting with the fathers or gathered to one's people conveyed the belief that death reunited the righteous with the faithful of previous generations. Early Christians expanded this imagery by describing the realm of rest as Abraham's side or Abraham's embrace, not a literal embrace, but a symbolic phrase representing honor, safety, and welcome. In this realm, the soul experiences peace beyond comprehension. Ancient writers use metaphors of gentle breezes, soft light, and restful gardens not to describe physical features, but to evoke the emotional and spiritual condition of the soul. It is restored, it is safe, it is complete. But rest does not mean inactivity. The ancient world did not imagine the righteous floating in dreamlike stillness. They believed the righteous remained aware, active in thought, engaged in contemplation, waiting for the final restoration of creation. Some traditions hold that the righteous pray, intercede, or rejoice in the divine presence. Others portray them as learning, growing, perceiving the unfolding of history, and understanding mysteries hidden during life. The realm of rest is, above all, a place of anticipation, not anxious anticipation, but hopeful expectation, the waiting for the resurrection, the restoration of creation, the new world free from decay and corruption. The ancients believed the righteous were held in this region not as disembodied spirits longing for escape, but as souls resting in security, their future guaranteed, their destiny assured. It is crucial to understand that this realm is not the final state. In ancient Jewish and early Christian thought, the ultimate hope was not disembodied bliss, but resurrection, embodied, restored life in a renewed creation. The realm of rest is a waiting place, a sanctuary in which the righteous experience peace until the moment of awakening. This belief shaped how people lived. It shaped how they endured suffering, how they viewed injustice, how they understood the purpose of faithfulness. The realm of rest was a promise that life mattered, that righteousness was seen, that suffering was not forgotten, and that the faithful would find peace beyond the grave. The descriptions of this realm vary across texts, but the core themes remain constant. 1. Peace without sorrow, no grief, no fear, no regret. Not because the soul forgets life, but because the truth of life is understood in full clarity and accepted without pain. 2. Awareness without suffering. The soul perceives, remembers, recognizes, but without the burdens that defined earthly existence. 3. Community without conflict. The righteous are gathered with others who share the same peace without division or misunderstanding. 4. Hope without uncertainty. The righteous know the resurrection is coming. They know their rest is temporary, not in a negative sense, but in a purposeful one. 5. Closeness without danger. The soul experiences nearness to the divine, not in visions or dreams, but in constant awareness. The realm of rest was a cornerstone of ancient hope. It allowed people to face death without terror. It gave meaning to the struggle for righteousness. It offered assurance that justice would prevail, that suffering would be healed, and that faithfulness would be honored. But the ancient world also held another belief, equally solemn, equally structured. If there was a realm of rest for the righteous, there was also a realm of shadow for those whose lives aligned with injustice, cruelty, or corruption. This shadowed realm was not described with fire or torment in early beliefs, but with loneliness, regret, and the painful clarity of moral truth. And it is this realm, the solemn counterpart to the region of rest, that the next chapter explores. In the ancient imagination, the afterlife was never a single, uniform destination. There was rest for the righteous, yes, but the ancients also believed in a realm of shadow, a place for those whose lives were shaped not by justice, but by corruption, cruelty, and the distortion of what it meant to be human. This was not a realm invented to frighten the masses. It was a sober reflection of a deeply held moral truth. Actions carve the shape of the soul, and the soul gravitates toward the region that mirrors its moral reality. To understand the realm of shadow, we must avoid projecting modern ideas onto ancient thought. Early Jewish and Christian writers did not imagine this realm as a fiery pit or a place of monstrous creatures tormenting the wicked. These images came centuries later, influenced by artistic tradition, folklore, and medieval imagination. The earliest descriptions are far more restrained and far more haunting. This realm is not defined by flames. It is defined by isolation. Not isolation in the physical sense, but isolation from goodness, from community, from truth. It is a state in which the soul sees itself clearly, without excuse, without distraction, without self-deception. And that clarity, sharp, unavoidable, uncompromising, is what creates the experience of shadow. From the perspective of the ancient world, wickedness was not merely a list of forbidden actions. It was a trajectory, a direction of life that led away from justice, mercy, humility, and compassion. A wicked life was a life bent inward, twisted around selfishness, greed, violence, dishonesty, or disregard for others. In this worldview, the realm of shadow was simply the natural end of such a life, a continuation of what the person had already become. Let us step into the imagery of the ancient texts, where the realm of rest was described through metaphors of light, gentle breezes, and peaceful clarity. The realm of shadow was portrayed through metaphors of dimness, heaviness, and separation. Not darkness as punishment, but darkness as distance. A soul accustomed to living in moral estrangement experiences this distance as its environment. Imagine a landscape with no horizon, a place without noise, without wind, without warmth, a place where the soul senses others but cannot reach them, a place where awareness remains but comfort does not. Ancient writers describe this realm as a silent cavern, a barren plain, a space where the soul exists but does not thrive. The realm is solemn, not chaotic, ordered, not violent. It is a holding place for the soul until the final resurrection and judgment, a waiting room where the consequence of life is felt not externally, but internally. In ancient texts, the wicked are described as being far from the righteous in death, not physically far, but existentially far. Their experiences differ because their lives prepared them for different outcomes. What does the soul encounter upon arriving in this realm? The first sensation, according to early Jewish tradition, is weight. Not weight in the physical sense, but a kind of existential heaviness. The soul feels the cumulative burden of its own choices. In life, people distract themselves from their guilt, justify their actions, or avoid confronting the harm they caused. But in the realm of shadow, distraction is impossible. The soul knows itself fully, completely. This is not torture. No external being imposes suffering. The soul experiences its own moral truth with an intensity that cannot be softened by denial. The ancient world believed this was justice, not retribution, but revelation. The next sensation is distance. The soul feels far from goodness, not because goodness has abandoned it, but because the soul aligned itself with something else during life. This distance is not darkness but absence, an absence of peace, of connection, of inner harmony. The righteous in the realm of rest experience completeness. The wicked in the realm of shadow experience incompleteness. In life, wickedness often disguises itself as strength, ambition, triumph. But in death, stripped of physical body, wealth, influence, and distraction, the soul stands alone with what it truly became. Another consistent theme in ancient descriptions is regret. Not dramatic wailing, not theatrical lamentation, but quiet, unescapable awareness. The soul sees clearly the harm it caused, the opportunities it wasted, the relationships it broke, the cruelty it justified. It feels the ripple effects of its choices, not as punishment, but as truth. The realm of shadow is a world of consequence. not imposed consequences, but natural ones. One of the most profound ideas in early Jewish thought is that the wicked are not sent to the realm of shadow. They arrive there naturally, drawn by the same principle that draws the righteous to the realm of rest, moral resonance. Souls gravitate where they belong. This realm is not entirely devoid of structure. Beneath the surface imagery of shadows and silence, there is order. Beings exist here, watchers of a different kind, not to torment, but to maintain boundaries. These beings ensure that souls remain within the realm appointed to them and do not cross into places they are not meant to inhabit. Ancient texts call these beings keepers of the deep, or guardians of the lower regions. They do not judge or punish. They simply maintain the structure of the unseen world. Their presence is solemn, impersonal, and unchanging. The soul in this realm is conscious, fully aware. It remembers its life with clarity, but cannot change it. It perceives others, but cannot knit its existence to theirs. It sees the goodness of the righteous from a distance, but cannot enter their peace. This distance is not imposed externally. It is the result of the soul's own alignment. It must be emphasized again. The realm of shadow is not eternal in ancient Jewish or early Christian thought. It is a temporary state, a waiting place, before the resurrection and final judgment. The soul awaits the moment when all creation is evaluated, when truth is revealed not only to the soul itself, but before all. Until that moment, the realm of shadow serves a purpose. 1. It reveals moral truth with perfect clarity. The soul sees what it became, without illusion. 2. It preserves order in the unseen world. Souls await their final destiny without wandering or collapsing into chaos. 3. It prepares the soul for judgment. Ancient authors believed that clarity was essential. The soul must understand itself before it can face final evaluation. For the wicked, this clarity is painful, not because an external force inflicts suffering, but because truth without distortion exposes the soul's brokenness. Some early writings describe the wicked crying out, not in physical agony, but in existential anguish, realizing too late the depth of their estrangement. Others describe them as silent, resigned, aware of the inevitability of justice. But even here, in the realm of shadow, the ancient texts maintain a thread of hope. They speak of resurrection, of restoration, of a day when even the wicked will rise, not to comfort, but to truth, and through truth to the ultimate restoration of creation. The realm of shadow is not final. It is the beginning of accountability. And that accountability, the resurrection, is the next great stage of the soul's journey. For the ancient world, the realm of rest and the realm of shadow were not final destinations. They were waiting places, holding worlds in which souls existed consciously but incompletely. According to Jewish and early Christian belief, history was not ultimately about spirits drifting through invisible realms. It was about a climactic moment to come, a moment the ancients called the awakening, the rising, the great resurrection. To modern ears, resurrection often sounds like a purely religious idea, an article of faith specific to certain traditions. But to ancient Israel and early Christianity, resurrection was not a metaphor, and certainly not an optional belief. It was the core of their worldview, the center of their hope, and the ultimate expression of divine justice. Without resurrection, life was an unfinished story. Without resurrection, righteousness remained unrewarded and wickedness unaccounted for. With resurrection, everything changed. To understand this belief, we must explore how it developed across centuries, through exile, oppression, prophecy, apocalyptic visions, and theological refinement. The roots of the idea, early hints in ancient Israel. In the earliest periods of Israel's history, the afterlife was not the center of attention. Life itself, community, covenant, land, blessing, held the primary focus. But even in those early texts, there were glimpses of something beyond the grave. A few individuals were described as being taken, rather than left, among the dead. Certain psalms spoke of deliverance from the pit. Some prophetic passages hinted at future restoration. These hints were not yet a doctrine. They were seeds. Everything changed during the Babylonian exile. When Jerusalem fell, when families were torn apart, when suffering overtook the nation, the question became unavoidable. Would God allow injustice to have the final word? The answer that emerged over centuries was powerful. No, the dead will rise. The explosion of afterlife. Belief in the Second Temple era. By the time the Second Temple period began, resurrection was no longer a vague hope. It had become a structured, widely embraced expectation. Apocalyptic literature from this era portrays the resurrection not as a mystical event, but as a historical one. The world will be transformed, the dead will stand again, bodies restored, lives renewed, justice made visible. This belief developed under intense suffering. Empires rose and fell, armies invaded, the righteous were killed, the wicked prospered, the world looked morally inverted. Under these conditions, resurrection was not escapism, it was justice, cosmic, unmistakable justice. What resurrection meant to the ancients. Unlike later ideas influenced by Greek philosophy, the ancient Jewish concept of resurrection was physical. Souls did not remain disembodied forever. They awaited the moment when God would breathe life back into them and restore them to embodied existence. The ancients did not picture ghosts floating into eternity. They pictured human beings, recognizable, renewed, whole, walking on a restored earth. This restoration was not merely of flesh. It was restoration of identity, memory, purpose, and dignity. The soul would no longer be vulnerable to decay or corruption. It would exist as humanity was meant to exist before suffering and death entered the world. The ancients believed the resurrection would include 1. The righteous rising first. Those in the realm of rest would awaken not in fear, but in joy, stepping into a world healed of its wounds. 2. The wicked rising as well, not to restoration, but to accountability, to face the truth of their lives before all creation. 3. A transformed creation, a world without oppression, without decay, without suffering, a world aligned with justice. This belief shaped how people endured suffering. It shaped their ethics, their courage, their hope. What happens to the soul at the moment of resurrection? In ancient thought, the resurrection was not a vague spiritual transformation. It was a reunion, soul and body brought together once more, but the body transformed into an incorruptible form. This body was not subject to sickness, aging, or physical limitation. It did not decay. It did not break. It was the human body as originally intended, perfected, radiant with life, aligned with truth. Ancient writers described this moment using vivid images, a trumpet blast, a shout that echoes across creation, graves opening like seeds cracking in spring, souls returning to bodies like dawn, returning to a dark horizon. These images were symbolic, not literal, but they expressed a profound belief. The resurrection is a cosmic event, not a private one. At the moment of awakening, the soul would feel something it had not felt even in the realm of rest: wholeness. For the first time since death, it would feel embodied. It would stand. It would breathe. Not because lungs are necessary, but because life itself had been restored in full. The righteous would feel overwhelming peace. The wicked would feel overwhelming clarity. Every soul would know that this was the moment toward which all history had pointed. Why resurrection mattered so deeply. To ancient Israel, the world was not a random sequence of events. It was a story with a beginning, a climax, and an ending, written by divine hands. If death had the final word, then the story stopped prematurely. If injustice triumphed, then the story was corrupted. Resurrection ensured that the narrative reached its rightful conclusion. For the righteous, resurrection was vindication, a public declaration that their suffering mattered, that their faithfulness was seen, that their hope was not in vain. For the wicked, resurrection was accountability, not arbitrary punishment, but the undeniable revelation of truth. For creation itself, resurrection was renewal, the return of harmony between humans, the earth, and the divine. The journey of souls through the resurrection. Ancient writers depict the resurrection not as an instantaneous blur, but as a structured series of events. 1. The awakening. The soul returns to its renewed body. 2. The gathering. The resurrected join together in a great assembly. 3. The revealing. Truth becomes clear, each life seen for what it truly was. 4. The separation. The righteous and wicked move into different destinies, no longer in overlapping realms. 5. The restoration. Creation itself is healed and made whole. In this vision, the resurrection is not merely an event. It is the turning point of all existence. How the realm of rest and the realm of shadow relate to resurrection. The realm of rest is a sanctuary before resurrection, a peaceful waiting place, filled with clarity and hope. The realm of shadow is a solemn waiting place, filled with clarity and regret. Both realms are temporary. Both point forward. Both are incomplete without resurrection. When resurrection arrives, both realms dissolve. Their purpose is fulfilled. Souls emerge, renewed or confronted, but awakened all the same. The power of the ancient vision. To the modern world, resurrection can seem distant. But for the ancients, it was the heartbeat of hope, the belief that injustice would not define the world, that suffering would not be eternal, that death would not be the ultimate reality. Resurrection was the promise that gave courage to the oppressed, meaning to the righteous, and warning to the wicked. And it leads directly into the next stage of the journey, the final judgment, the moment when every soul stands before truth, not metaphorical truth, not symbolic truth, but the full revelation of who they became. This is the moment when the watchers, the realms, the resurrection, and all human history converge. The resurrection, in ancient belief, was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the ultimate revelation, the moment when every soul, righteous or wicked, awakened into a world restored, renewed, and illuminated by truth. But the resurrection led inevitably to something even more profound, something both hopeful and solemn, the final judgment. Modern imagination often pictures this moment in theatrical terms: a blazing throne, a courtroom in the clouds, scrolls unfurled by angels. But these images belong mostly to later artistic tradition. The earliest Jewish and early Christian sources describe something far more grounded, far more intimate, and far more overwhelming. A moment when each human being stands before perfect truth, unable to hide, unable to distort, unable to pretend. To the ancients, judgment was not about bureaucracy. It was not a trial with legal technicalities. It was the unveiling of reality. The soul encountered truth not as an idea, but as a presence that revealed what the person had become, why their life mattered, and what their place would be in the restored creation. To understand this moment, we must step into the worldview of ancient Israel and early Christianity, where history was not a circle, but a story, and every story needs its resolution. Chapter: The Purpose of Judgment. Why did the ancients believe judgment was necessary? Because in their worldview, justice was woven into the fabric of creation. The world was not morally neutral. Every action had consequence. Every life had direction. And the world to come could not be whole unless all injustice was addressed and all righteousness recognized. The ancients believed judgment served three cosmic purposes. 1. To reveal truth, not partial truth, not personal truth, absolute truth, understood by all. 2. To restore justice. Every act hidden in life becomes visible. Every wrong is accounted for. Every good is honored. 3. To finalize destiny. Souls move into their eternal state, not through arbitrariness, but through the unveiled reality of who they became. Judgment was the moment when creation was realigned with truth, the setting of judgment in ancient thought. Early writings describe the setting of judgment not in physical terms, but symbolic ones. Not a courtroom, not a throne room painted in gold, not a fiery stage where souls tremble in terror. Instead, they describe a great assembly, a restored earth under divine light, the presence of God has overwhelming clarity. Humanity gathered without division of nation, rank, or status. Some texts portray judgment as taking place in an open plain, a symbol of visibility. Others describe it occurring in a renewed Jerusalem, a symbol of restoration. Still others describe it with cosmic language. Heavens opened, earth purified. These images are metaphors for one truth: nothing is hidden anymore. The experience of standing before the divine. Ancient writers describe judgment not through spectacle, but through experience. They focus not on what people see, but on what they feel. For the righteous, judgment is described as a moment of peace, vindication, recognition. Their lives were often filled with suffering, rejection, injustice, or struggle. But now, standing before truth, all that suffering is understood in context. Their struggles matter, their perseverance matters, their faithfulness matters. For the righteous, judgment is not fear, it is completion. For the wicked, judgment is described in different terms: not flames, not torture, not monstrous beings dragging them away. Those images came centuries later. The earliest texts speak of shame, regret, exposure, the collapse of falsehood, the recognition of the harm they caused. The wicked are not condemned by external force. They are condemned by truth, revealed without distortion. Ancient texts often repeat a single phrase: each person is shown what they have done. This does not mean a list of deeds projected on a cosmic screen. It means the soul sees its life with the same clarity the watchers perceived earlier, But now, in the light of divine presence, where excuses lose their power and self-deception dissolves. Books or records, symbolic imagery. Explained later traditions speak of books being opened. This is symbolic language. The ancients did not imagine literal volumes or scrolls. Books were metaphors for memory, accountability, truth. In ancient thought, nothing done in life vanishes. Every deed shapes the soul. Every choice becomes part of its permanent identity. Thus, when the books are opened, it is not a bureaucratic moment. It is the unveiling of the soul's own reality. The righteous shine because their lives aligned with goodness. The wicked shrink because their lives were bent toward harm. The books are not physical. They are the soul itself. Judgment is not retribution. It is revelation. One of the most misunderstood aspects of ancient judgment is the idea of punishment. The earliest Jewish and Christian sources rarely describe punishment in terms of flames or torture. Instead, punishment is framed as outcome, the natural consequence of a soul that aligned itself with estrangement and injustice. The ancients saw judgment as the moment when who you truly are, what you truly loved, what you truly pursued, becomes unmistakably evident. The righteous stand in peace because their souls resonate with peace. The wicked stand in sorrow because their souls resonate with sorrow. Judgment is the moment when the moral structure of the cosmos is unveiled. The judge, how ancient authors describe the divine presence. The ancients did not imagine God presiding over judgment with human-like emotion. No anger, no frustration, no impatience. They pictured judgment as perfect clarity, perfect justice, perfect impartiality. The divine presence does not interrogate, it reveals. To stand before that presence is to encounter the truth of one's life with perfect understanding. For some, this is joy. For others, it is anguish. But in both cases, the reaction comes from within the soul, not forced upon it. Ancient texts emphasize that the divine presence is not distant or cold. It is light, overwhelming, penetrating, transformative. The righteous feel embraced by it. The wicked fear it because truth is unbearable to a soul built on deception or cruelty. But judgment is not cruelty. It is the restoration of reality. Witnesses. Do others see your life? Ancient writings sometimes speak of witnesses at judgment, not earthly judges, but beings who observed human lives. These references connect back to the watchers described earlier in the journey. In judgment, their role is not to accuse or defend. It is to confirm truth, ensuring justice is accurate and complete. But even with these witnesses, the focus remains on the soul's own clarity. The soul reveals itself. Nothing external needs to be added. Separation, the most important outcome. After truth is unveiled, ancient sources describe a separation. This separation is the dividing line between those who belong in the renewed creation, those who do not. This separation is not arbitrary. It is the natural result of the soul's alignment. The righteous, aligned with love, justice, humility, compassion, belong in the world restored. Their souls harmonize with the renewed creation. The wicked, aligned with cruelty, selfishness, corruption, exploitation, cannot harmonize with a world built on truth and righteousness. Their souls remain dissonant. This separation is described in ancient texts as light and shadow, nearness and distance, belonging and exile. But it is always portrayed as the final, necessary step before the new creation is revealed. Finality, the end of all secrets, the ancients believed judgment was the great equalizer. Kings and slaves stood side by side. The powerful and powerless faced the same truth. Wealth, power, status, all dissolved. What remained was the soul's true identity, revealed without distortion or disguise. In this moment, forgiveness is complete, justice is complete truth, is complete creation, is ready to be made new. This is the moment when history steps into its final chapter. And that final chapter, the soul's eternal home, is the subject of the next and last part. The resurrection and the final judgment bring the soul to the threshold of an entirely new reality, the moment for which all creation has been waiting. For ancient Jewish and early Christian writers, this was not the fading of the story, not a descent into abstraction, but the true beginning. Everything that came before, birth, life, suffering, joy, death, the realm of rest, the realm of shadow, the watchers, the resurrection, the judgment, all of it led to this, the point at which the soul enters its eternal home. To understand this final destiny, we must step into the mindset of the ancient world, where creation was not disposable, and humanity was not meant for disembodied drifting. Heaven, in early thought, was not the soul's permanent dwelling. Neither was the realm of shadow. Neither was death. The ancients believed humanity was made for embodied life in a renewed world, a creation restored to its original harmony, physical, vibrant, flourishing, free from decay. This belief stands at the heart of everything. The ultimate home of the soul is not escape from the world, but the world transformed. What follows is the final stage in the journey, a stage described in ancient texts with reverence, caution, and poetic vision. Not everything is spelled out in precise detail, because the reality is beyond human language, but the core themes are consistent, powerful, and deeply rooted in ancient thought. The new creation, a world restored, not replaced. Ancient writers did not imagine eternity as clouds, harps, or endless spiritual drifting. Their hope was far more concrete, the renewal of creation itself. The world, once fractured by injustice and suffering, would be healed. Mountains, seas, plains, the entire fabric of existence would be infused with peace and purpose. Everything broken would be remade. Everything lost would be restored. This idea appears repeatedly across prophetic writings and apocalyptic visions. Sometimes it is described as a new earth, other times as a restored Jerusalem, a garden city where humanity and the divine coexist without separation. These images are symbolic, but they express a real belief. Eternity is not disembodied. It is embodied in a perfected world. To the ancients, this was essential. Humanity was created to live in a world shaped by justice, beauty, and harmony. Death disrupted that plan. Resurrection and judgment restore it. The state of the righteous in the eternal world. After judgment, the righteous enter a transformed existence. Ancient writings describe their final state using images of peace without fragility, joy without loss, life without decay, relationship without conflict, purpose without exhaustion. These descriptions emphasize not what is absent, death, suffering, regret, but what is present, fullness, completeness, harmony, light. The righteous do not become angelic beings. They remain human, fully human, but humanity as it was always meant to be. strong, whole, wise, connected, filled with clarity and purpose. The renewed body is not bound by weakness or disease. It no longer drifts toward aging or collapses under limitation. It participates in a world where nothing corrodes or corrupts. The righteous experience the divine presence not as overwhelming terror, but as constant joy, a nearness that brings peace rather than fear. The barriers between humans and God, humans and one another, humans and creation, are dissolved. Everything that once fractured life, fear, ego, envy, injustice, fatigue, is entirely gone. This is not static bliss. It is active, flourishing existence. Ancient writers describe the righteous as learning, exploring, worshiping, creating, participating in the life of the renewed world. Their joy is not passive. It is vibrant. What becomes of relationships? This question, whispered across centuries, mattered deeply to the ancients. Will we know one another? Will we remember our lives? Will love continue? Will family bonds endure? The early writings respond with remarkable clarity. Yes, but transformed. Identities are not erased. Memories are not wiped. Love is not diluted. Instead, everything is purified of the distortions that plagued earthly relationships: jealousy, insecurity, grief, misunderstanding. In the renewed world, people recognize one another not through physical appearance alone, but through the essence of their transformed identities. The connection is deeper, not shallower. Bonds formed through righteousness remain. Wounds caused in life are healed. The righteous do not cling to one another from fear of loss, because loss no longer exists. They do not compete, do not envy, do not guard themselves. All relationships reflect the harmony that defines the renewed creation. The fate of the wicked after judgment. Ancient Jewish and early Christian writings describe the fate of the wicked in solemn, understated terms. They do not indulge in medieval depictions of flames or endless torture. Instead, they focus on separation, distance, and the final consequence of alienation from goodness. The wicked do not enter the renewed world because their souls do not resonate with its harmony. They dwelled in shadow during the waiting period before resurrection. After judgment, that separation becomes permanent. This is not a realm of torment imposed by an external force. It is the soul's own estrangement made final. The wicked exist in a state of isolation from the renewed world, conscious, aware, but removed from the harmony they rejected. This is the ancient meaning of destruction, not annihilation, but the collapse of purpose, the inability to participate in the world restored. The righteous flourish, the wicked remain apart. Judgment has been completed. Truth has been revealed. The moral order of creation stands purified. Free will and the shape of eternity. One profound theme in ancient thought is that eternity does not override the soul's identity. It fulfills it. The righteous who sought goodness, truth, justice, and mercy enter a world built upon those virtues. The wicked, who aligned themselves with corruption or injustice, cannot harmonize with such a world. Eternity reveals the final true shape of each soul, not as punishment, but as reality. Free will remains intact. The soul becomes what it chose. The presence of God in the eternal world. In the renewed creation, the divine presence is not distant. It is immediate, constant, sustaining. But this presence is not described through physical imagery. Ancient writers use symbols: light breath, living water, glory. These are metaphors for something deeper, the sense that the world is infused with meaning, that every moment is aligned with purpose, that existence itself reflects divine life. The righteous live in this presence without fear. The wicked exist apart from it, not because they were rejected, but because their lives aligned them with estrangement. The universe completed. At last, creation reaches its intended form. The story that began with humanity, shaped from the dust and breathed into life, ends with humanity restored to dignity and purpose, living in harmony with the world and with God. Death no longer exists. Decay no longer exists. Suffering no longer exists. Separation no longer exists for the righteous, the watchers, the veil, the realms, the resurrection, the judgment. Their roles are complete. The unseen world that once mediated between life and death no longer serves a purpose because death itself has been undone. The righteous live in a world where justice is normal, peace is natural purpose, is unending joy, is stable truth, is effortless, life is eternal. This is not fantasy. It was the core hope of the ancient world, the belief that creation, broken by violence and injustice, would be healed, and that humanity would dwell forever in harmony. The wicked remain apart, conscious, aware, existing outside the joy of the renewed world. Their estrangement is their final state, not imposed cruelty, but the ultimate consequence of a life turned away from good. The story ends with creation whole, humanity restored, history fulfilled, the soul at home.